Mom said, "Your sister deserves better," until I showed up in my Tesla paying her bills. My whole life, I was the background character in the family portrait, the sensible, quiet one who never caused any trouble, and therefore never got any attention. My name is Lauren, and for 28 years, I was the invisible daughter. My sister, Chloe, was the sun. Everything revolved around her. She was the artist, the free spirit, the one with the dazzling smile and a personality that charmed everyone. Our mother, Barbara, poured all her hopes and the family's limited resources into Chloe. It was always, "Chloe needs new paints," or "Chloe's trip to Europe is for her art, it's an investment." My community college tuition was an expense. My mother always said my sister deserved better until I paid her bills in my Tesla. For 28 years, I was invisible. Want to see how I went from the quiet daughter to a millionaire? Subscribe and like for my full story. I studied computer science. My mom called it a boring boy's hobby. While Chloe was getting praise for a mediocre painting of a fruit bowl, I was teaching myself to code in my small bedroom, the glow of the monitor my only companion. I got a scholarship to a state university, worked 2 jobs to cover my living costs, and graduated with honors. No one came to my graduation. Chloe had an art show that day, and of course, that was the priority. I didn't even get a phone call. I remember sitting in my cap and gown, eating a burger by myself, and making a promise. I wasn't going to do it for them or for revenge. I was going to do it for me. I was going to build a life so successful, so solid, that their opinion would be nothing more than a faint, distant noise. And I did. I moved to the West Coast, got a job at a small tech startup, and worked relentlessly. I poured all the energy that I had once spent trying to earn my mother's approval into my career. The startup grew, and so did my role. A few years later, we were acquired by a major tech firm, and my stock options made me a millionaire overnight. I didn't tell them. I just kept working, building my own company this time. The call came on a Tuesday morning. It was my mother, Barbara. Her voice had that familiar tone, a mix of strained politeness and impending demand. "Lauren, dear," she started, a term she only used when she wanted something. "How are you?" I kept my answers short. I knew this wasn't a social call. Finally, she got to the point. "It's Chloe," she said, her voice dropping into a dramatic sigh. "She's just having such a hard time. The gallery isn't selling her work, and she has some bills. They're threatening to turn off the power." I felt that old, familiar sting. They never called to see how I was. They only called when the golden child needed a bailout. In the past, I would have sent a few $100s just to keep the peace. But this time was different. "How much does she need?" I asked, my voice calm and steady. My mother listed the amounts for the power, the rent, the car payment. It added up to a few $1,000s. For her, it was a mountain. For me, it was a rounding error. "I'll be there this afternoon," I said. "I'll handle it." I could hear the surprise in her voice. She probably expected me to just wire the money. My physical presence was an anomaly. I hung up, looked out my office window at the city skyline, and smiled. It was time. I drove the 4 hours back to my hometown. Not in my old, reliable Honda, but in the brand new Tesla models I'd bought myself last month. It was midnight silver, silent and sleek. It was everything my family thought I wasn't. I pulled up to the small, worn-down house I grew up in. The lawn was overgrown, and the paint was peeling from the porch railing. Nothing had changed. I saw them through the front window, sitting at the kitchen table under a single dim light bulb. Chloe was crying theatrically into her hands, and my mother was rubbing her back, looking worried. I took a deep breath and walked to the door. The moment my mother opened it, her jaw dropped. She wasn't looking at my face. She was looking past me at the car gleaming in the driveway. "Lauren? What is that?" she stammered. Chloe came to the doorway, her tear-stained face a mask of confusion and envy. "Is that yours?" Chloe asked, her voice sharp. "Hello, Mom." "Chloe," I said, walking past them into the house. The pile of red-stamped envelopes was right there on the table, just as I'd imagined. "You said there were some bills to pay." I took out my wallet. Not the worn leather one from college, but a slim designer one. I pulled out a black credit card. My mother just stared, speechless. For the first time in my life, I had all the attention. They saw the car, the clothes, the confidence. But they had no idea this was just the beginning. They thought this was about money. They were about to find out it was about justice. I laid the black credit card on the worn kitchen table, right on top of the pile of red-stamped envelopes. The sound it made, a soft click against the wood, was louder than a gunshot in the sudden silence. My mother, Barbara, stared at it like it was a venomous snake. Chloe, my sister, finally snapped out of her trance. "What is that?" she asked, her voice a mix of suspicion and greed. "Is that real?" "It pays the bills," I said simply, my eyes not leaving my mother's. "Which is what you called me for, isn't it?" Barbara finally found her voice, though it was shaky. "Lauren, we don't understand. That car, these clothes. You work with computers, don't you?" The way she said computers made it sound like I repaired toasters in a dusty basement. She couldn't comprehend a world where her boring daughter could have this kind of success. In her mind, success was flashy, artistic, like a painting in a gallery. It wasn't silent lines of code that built empires. "I do," I confirmed. I picked up the first envelope, the electric bill. It was marked Final Notice. I pulled out my phone, opened the utility app, and paid it in less than 30 seconds. I showed them the confirmation screen. One down. I moved to the next one, the rent. Another few taps. Paid. Chloe watched my fingers move across the screen. Her eyes narrowed. The theatrical tears from earlier were gone, replaced by a hard, calculating look. She wasn't the struggling artist anymore. She was a rival assessing a threat. "How?" Chloe demanded. "How are you doing this? Did you marry someone rich?" The question was so typical of her. She couldn't imagine a woman, especially me, achieving this on her own. It had to be through a man. I almost laughed. "No, Chloe, I didn't marry anyone, I worked." I paid the last bill, the car payment for her little convertible that was probably more for show than for getting to job interviews. The entire debt that had been a mountain crushing them was gone in under 5 minutes. I put my phone and my card back in my wallet. The silence returned, heavier this time. They had gotten what they wanted, but the relief they should have felt was absent. In its place was a thick, uncomfortable tension. My mother finally broke it. "Well, thank you, Lauren. We'll pay you back, of course, when Chloe sells her next piece." It was an empty promise we all knew was a lie. They had never paid me back for anything. My father, before he passed, always said, "A house with a weak foundation will always fall, no matter how pretty the paint is." He was a builder, a man of simple truths. He saw the cracks in our family long before I did. My mother had built her entire world around Chloe, painting the exterior with praise and admiration, but the foundation of responsibility, of fairness, was completely rotten. "We're not going to do it that way this time," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. They both looked at me, surprised. "What do you mean?" Barbara asked, clutching the collar of her robe. "I mean, I'm not your emergency fund anymore," I stated. "I'm happy to help, but not with handouts." I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. This was the moment I had rehearsed in my head 1,000 times on the drive over. "I have a proposal. I will cover all of Chloe's living expenses and art supplies for 1 year." Chloe's eyes lit up. My mother let out a sigh of relief. They thought they'd hit the jackpot. "But," I continued, letting the word hang in the air, "there are conditions. 2 of them." The excitement in the room vanished. "Conditions?" Chloe scoffed. "You're putting conditions on helping your own sister?" "Yes," I said, looking directly at her. "Condition 1. You will attend a financial management course. Online. I'll pay for it. You will send me your certificate of completion. You need to learn how to manage money, not just spend it." Her face soured. "That's ridiculous. I'm an artist, not an accountant." "And artists need to eat," I countered. "Which brings me to condition 2. I paused, letting them wait. "You will get a part-time job. 20 hours a week. Coffee shop, bookstore, retail, I don't care. something that provides a steady paycheck and a connection to the real world. The explosion was immediate. "A job?" Chloe shrieked, standing up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "Are you trying to humiliate me? I'm a painter. My art is my job. You want me to be a barista?" "Mom, are you hearing this?" She turned to Barbara for support, as she always did. My mother looked at me, her expression a mixture of shock and pleading. "Lauren, dear, that's a bit much. Her art requires focus. She can't be distracted by that kind of work." "That kind of work paid for my degree," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "The degree that is now paying for this house. You have a choice. You can accept my offer, and Chloe can have a year of stability to create whatever art she wants without worrying about the lights going out. Or you can refuse and figure it out on your own. The bills are paid for this month. The next one is up to you." I stood up, my keys in my hand. I had laid the trap. I knew their pride, their arrogance, but I also knew their desperation. I walked to the door, my back to them. I could feel their eyes on me, the gears turning in their heads as they weighed their entitlement against their empty bank accounts. I didn't look back. I just waited. I stood by the door, the cool metal of the doorknob under my hand. I didn't need to turn around to know the scene behind me. My mother Barbara wringing her hands, her mind racing for a new angle of attack, and my sister Chloe fuming, her face probably red with indignation. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. "You can't be serious," Chloe finally spat, her voice dripping with contempt. "You come waltzing in here after years, flashing your money around, and you think you can dictate my life? You want me to pour coffee for strangers? I have a bachelor's of fine arts. I've had my work in 3 different shows." I turned around slowly. "Shows that didn't pay the bills, Chloe. Shows that Mom had to borrow money for. I'm not dictating your life. I'm offering you a lifeline that doesn't involve drowning our mother in debt." Barbara rushed forward, placing a hand on my arm. Her touch was meant to be gentle, motherly, but it felt like a claw. "Lauren, please," she whispered, her eyes wide and pleading. "Don't do this. You were always the sensible one, the one who understood. Your sister is delicate. She's an artist. Her spirit can't be crushed by that kind of drudgery." "Delicate?" I pulled my arm away. I was working 40 hours a week at a campus diner while studying for my finals. Was my spirit not a concern then? Was I not delicate when I had to take the bus home for Christmas because I couldn't afford a plane ticket, while you two were in Italy for Chloe's inspiration? The memory was sharp, painful. I had spent that Christmas alone in my dorm room, eating instant noodles and coding a project that was due on the first day of the new semester. "That was different," Barbara said dismissively. "That was for your education. This is about her career, her soul." "My education is her career," I said, my voice as cold as ice. I gestured around the small, shabby kitchen. "My education is paying for her soul right now. The electricity you're using to see my face, paid for by my boring boy's hobby." Chloe scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, here we go. Poor little Lauren, the martyr. You've been waiting your whole life for this moment, haven't you? To rub our noses in it. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of my talent." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. I didn't see a talented artist. I saw a spoiled woman child who had been so coddled she couldn't see the world beyond her own reflection. There was no jealousy in me. There was only a vast, empty space where respect and sisterly affection used to be. "No, Chloe. I'm not jealous," I said, and the honesty of it surprised even me. "I'm just done. I'm done being the emergency contact. I'm done being the silent, reliable ATM. This offer isn't about punishing you. It's about teaching you something our mother never did. Responsibility." I turned back to my mother. "My company, Nexus Solutions, just secured a Series B funding round of $50 million. I manage a team of 30 engineers. I make decisions every day that affect hundreds of people and millions of dollars. I don't have time for this drama. I don't have the energy for it anymore." I saw the flicker of shock in their eyes. Nexus Solutions. 50 million. These were concrete things they could understand, things they could look up on their phones. My success was no longer an abstract concept. It had a name and a number attached to it. A very, very big number. The offer stands for 48 hours, I said, my hand back on the doorknob. You have my number. If Chloe gets a job and enrolls in the course, I'll set up a monthly transfer to cover her rent and supplies. If she doesn't, then this is the last dollar you'll ever see from me. The choice is yours. I opened the door and walked out into the cool night air without another word. I didn't look back. As I slid into the silent, leather-scented interior of my Tesla, I saw their silhouettes in the doorway, two figures frozen in a tableau of shock and disbelief. I started the car, the large touchscreen glowing to life, and pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I saw the house, my childhood home, shrink until it was just another dim light on a dark street. I had paid their bills. I had laid out the terms. I had built a foundation for myself out of steel and silicon. Now it was time to see if their house, built on a foundation of lies and favoritism, would finally come crashing down. The ball was in their court, but I knew I had already won the game. The drive back to my city was a blur of highway lights and quiet satisfaction. I didn't feel triumphant, not in the way you see in movies. There was no fist pumping, no victorious laughter. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time, I had walked into that house not as the daughter begging for scraps of approval, but as an equal, a separate entity with my own rules. I had drawn a line not in the sand, but in concrete. I spent the next 36 hours immersed in work. I led a 3-hour strategy meeting on a new software launch, reviewed quarterly projections, and interviewed a candidate for a senior developer position. My life was moving forward at 100 miles an hour, a complex machine that I had built with my own hands. The drama in that little house felt like it was from another planet, another lifetime. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait by it. The 48-hour clock was ticking for them, not for me. I had already made my decision. The call came with 4 hours to spare. It was an unknown number, which I almost ignored, but a gut feeling told me to answer. "Is this Lauren?" a timid male voice asked. "It is." "Who's this?" I replied, my guard instantly up. "My name is Mark. I'm the manager at the Coffee Bean downtown. I'm, calling about Chloe's application?" I almost dropped the phone. Chloe had actually done it. She had applied for a job. I couldn't keep the surprise out of my voice. "Oh, okay. What about it?" "Well, she put you down as a reference," he said, sounding apologetic, which is a little unusual for a barista position, but she insisted. "She said you were her sister and her financial sponsor?" I had to smile. Of course, Chloe would frame it that way, making herself sound like a grant recipient rather than someone who needed a job to pay her bills. "Yes, that's correct," I said, keeping my tone professional. "She's a hard worker when she's passionate about something. She's creative and a fast learner." I wasn't lying. She was creative. And she could learn fast when she wanted to. The problem was she rarely wanted to learn anything that didn't involve a paintbrush. "Okay, great," Mark said, sounding relieved. "We're giving her a trial shift tomorrow morning. Thanks for your time." He hung up. I stared at my phone, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Pride? Maybe a little. But mostly, I felt a profound sense of disbelief. The unbreakable Chloe had bent. The first condition was on its way to being met. My phone rang again almost immediately. This time, it was my mother's number. "You humiliated her." Barbara's voice was a low hiss, devoid of any of the fake sweetness from before. "I just got a call from her new manager. Sounds like she's employed," I said calmly. "That's good news." "Good news? He called you. She had to put her own sister down as a reference for a minimum wage job. All her friends from the art college will see her there. Do you have any idea what you've done to her reputation?" "Her reputation wasn't paying her rent, Mom," I said, my patience wearing thin. "What about the second condition? Did she enroll in the financial management course?" There was a pause. I could hear Chloe's muffled voice shouting in the background, something about spreadsheets and torture. "She's looking at them," Barbara said evasively. "There are so many options. It's overwhelming for a creative mind." "It's a simple online course, Mom. It takes 5 minutes to enroll. The 48 hours are up in 3 hours. No certificate of enrollment, no deal. The monthly transfer is already set up and waiting. All it needs is for me to press confirm." "You're being so cold, Lauren." So transactional, she said, her voice shifting into the familiar wounded tone of a martyr. I don't know what happened to my sweet girl. She grew up, I said quietly. She had to, because no one else was going to pay her way for her. I heard a struggle, and then Chloe's voice, shrill and furious, was on the line. You think this is funny, don't you? Making me serve lattes to people I used to party with? You're pathetic, Lauren. You have all this money and all you can think to do with it is torture me. I'm not torturing you, Chloe. I'm giving you the tools to build a life where you don't have to call me or Mom every time a bill is due. It's called independence. You should try it. I hate you, she seethed. I absolutely hate you. I know, I said, and the sadness in my own voice was real. Send me the confirmation email for the course. You have 3 hours. I hung up the phone. I didn't give them a chance to argue further. I walked over to my large office window, looking down at the bustling city below. Each light was a person, a life, a story. For so long, my story had been tangled up with theirs, a supporting role in the great artist Chloe. But not anymore. I had cut the strings. Whether they chose to learn to stand on their own or fall was now entirely up to them. The clock was ticking. The 3 hours passed in a deafening silence. I spent them at my desk trying to focus on a quarterly projection report, but the numbers swam in front of my eyes. Every email notification made my stomach clench. I expected a hastily forwarded confirmation, a bitter, one-line message from Chloe, but there was nothing. Not a word. My business partner, Mark, poked his head into my office. He was one of the few people who knew the rough outlines of my family situation. Everything okay, Lauren? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. You've been staring at the same spreadsheet for an hour. I don't think our profits have changed that drastically since lunch. I managed a weak smile. Family stuff, the usual. The usual being they need money and you're the bad guy for asking them to act like adults, Mark said. He had a bluntness I appreciated. He'd seen me work myself to the bone for years. That's the one, I sighed, pushing my chair back. I gave them an ultimatum, a simple one. Get a job, which Chloe did, and enroll in a free online course about managing money. 48 hours. The deadline was 10 minutes ago. And let me guess, he said, walking in and sitting in the chair opposite my desk. Crickets. I nodded, checking my inbox one last time. Deafening silence. I pulled up the banking app on my monitor. The scheduled transfer for their monthly expenses sat there, a bright orange button waiting to be clicked. It was a substantial amount, enough to cover the mortgage on my mother's house, their bills, and Chloe's car payment. My finger hovered over the trackpad, but I didn't click. I closed the window. Good for you, Mark said quietly. Seriously, it's the hardest thing to do, but it's the right thing. It doesn't feel like it, I confessed. It feels cruel. Is it crueler than letting them drown slowly, thinking you'll always be their life raft? He countered. He was right. My father, before he left, used to say, "You can't build a house on someone else's land, Lauren. Eventually, they'll ask for rent." My mother and Chloe had been living on my land for years, and they didn't just expect it for free. They complained about the landscaping. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of meetings. I tried to bury myself in work, to push the inevitable confrontation out of my mind. But it was always there, a low hum of anxiety beneath the surface. I knew it was coming. It came at 7 p.m., just as I was packing up to leave. My phone buzzed with my mother's name. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it buzzed again, and again. On the fourth call, I answered, putting it on speakerphone as I gathered my things. Lauren. Finally. Barbara's voice was tight with panic, the earlier manipulative sadness completely gone. The money isn't here. The transfer didn't come through. I know, Mom. The deadline passed. Chloe didn't send me the enrollment confirmation. Don't be ridiculous. It was a silly course. She was busy with her new job. She was tired. You can't just cut us off over something so trivial. It wasn't trivial, I said calmly, walking towards the elevator. It was the one thing I asked for, a sign that she was willing to try, that you both were. We are trying, she shrieked, and I could hear Chloe sobbing theatrically in the background. This is just a game to you, isn't it? You have your fancy Tesla and your glass office, and you like dangling it over our heads. My Tesla didn't buy itself, Mom, and this office didn't build itself. I worked for them. Well, what are we supposed to do? Her voice cracked. The mortgage payment is due tomorrow, Lauren. Tomorrow. I'm sure you'll figure something out, I said, my voice colder than I intended. Chloe has a paycheck coming. You can sell some of her art. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, then a different kind of silence. Not angry, but terrified. It's not just the mortgage, Barbara whispered, her voice suddenly small and frail. It was a tone I'd never heard from her before. It was genuine fear. You don't understand. We got a notice today. A final notice. I stopped in the empty lobby, my hand on the glass door to the street. What are you talking about? I've been paying the mortgage for 2 years. It's never been late. It's not that mortgage, she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. It's the other one, the second one. We had to take out a second mortgage last year for Chloe's art supplies and other things. We thought we could handle it. I felt the blood drain from my face. A second mortgage? On a house I was already paying for? Lauren, my mother's voice was barely audible. If we don't pay $5,000 by Friday, the bank is foreclosing on the house. I stood there on the cold marble floor of the lobby, the phone feeling like a block of ice against my ear. Foreclosure. The word echoed in the silence, ugly and final. $5,000. It wasn't the amount that stunned me. To me now, it was a manageable sum. It was the deception. The sheer, breathtaking depth of their irresponsibility. They had built a second tower of debt on a foundation I was already struggling to keep from crumbling. How? I finally managed to ask, my voice hollow. How could you take out a second mortgage, Mom? On what income? Chloe doesn't have a steady job, and you haven't worked in 15 years. We thought Chloe's career was about to take off, Barbara stammered. She had a big gallery show planned. She needed new canvases, a new studio space. It was an investment, Lauren. You know, like you invest in your codes. An investment. My jaw tightened. She was comparing my multi-million-dollar career to Chloe's finger painting hobby that had done nothing but drain the family's resources for over a decade. I could picture it perfectly. Chloe, with her dramatic hand gestures, convincing my mother that spending thousands on a warehouse studio in an expensive part of town was the key to her becoming a famous artist. And my mother, blinded by favoritism, signing the papers without a second thought. Send me the paperwork, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. The foreclosure notice, the loan agreement for the second mortgage, everything. Email it to me now. But, Lauren, we don't have time. They need the money by Friday. Now, Mom, I repeated, and then I hung up. I walked out of the glass doors of my office building and into the cool California evening. The city lights were just beginning to sparkle, but I didn't see them. I saw the faded yellow siding of my childhood home. I saw the crack in the driveway I'd tripped over 1,000 times. I saw Chloe's art projects cluttering every surface while my textbooks were confined to a small corner of my room. That house wasn't just a building, it was a museum of my invisibility. And now they were about to lose it. My phone buzzed. It was an email from my mother. Subject line: urgent. Attached were scanned PDFs of the documents. I sat on a bench, the cities hum a distant noise, and opened them on my phone. It was worse than I thought. The interest rate on the second mortgage was predatory. They'd borrowed $20,000 and had barely paid back any of it. The $5,000 was just to stop the immediate foreclosure. The total debt was much higher. They were drowning. I did the one thing I had trained myself to do when faced with a complex problem. I called in an expert. I dialed my financial advisor, Mark. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 50s who had helped me manage my windfall from the startup. Mark, I said when he answered. I have a situation. I explained everything, my voice flat and clinical, as if I were describing a bug in a piece of software. I told him about the first mortgage I was paying, the secret second mortgage, the foreclosure. He was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was devoid of emotion. Lauren, from a purely financial standpoint, you need to walk away. This house is not an asset, it's a liability. You're throwing good money after bad. You've already been more than generous. It's my family home, I whispered, hating how weak it sounded. It's a building with a compromised financial structure, he countered. Let me be blunt. You're enabling them. Paying this off won't fix the underlying issue. They will do it again. What's to stop them from taking out a third mortgage? Or running up massive credit card debt? He was right. Every logical part of my brain knew he was right. My dad, a quiet, practical man who passed away when I was in high school, used to have a saying. He was a carpenter. You can't build a house on a rotten foundation, he'd tell me when a piece of wood was warped. My family's foundation was rotten to the core with entitlement and irresponsibility. What do you suggest I do? I asked Mark. If you feel you must intervene, he said, you don't just give them the money. You take control. You pay the bank directly, but in exchange for the title of the house. You own it. They can live there, but under your rules. You set up a formal agreement. No more loans, no more investments without your approval. You turn their safety net into a cage of their own making. A cage. The idea was both horrifying and deeply satisfying. Owning the house. Owning the very stage where I had always been a background character. I would be the director. I would be the one setting the scene. Thank you, Mark, I said. I know what I need to do. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. For years, I had wanted their approval. Then, I had settled for their indifference. But now, for the first time, I had something far more powerful. I had leverage. I booked a red-eye flight to my hometown. I didn't tell my mother or Chloe I was coming. It was time to go home and inspect the foundation of our family, once and for all. And if it was rotten, I was the only one with the tools to either tear it down or rebuild it on my own terms. The plane landed before dawn. I didn't check a bag, so I was out of the airport and in a cab within 15 minutes. The air was humid and smelled of rain, a scent I hadn't realized I'd forgotten. My life on the West Coast was all dry heat and ocean salt. This was the smell of my childhood, of walking to school under gray skies. The cab driver made small talk, but I just nodded, watching the familiar, dreary landscape of my hometown slide by. It looked smaller than I remembered, the buildings closer together, the colors faded. My mother poured everything into my sister while I was in the background. What would you have done in my place? Comment what you think and share. When we pulled onto my old street, I saw the house. It was the same pale yellow, but the paint was peeling near the gutters, and one of the shutters on an upstairs window hung at an angle. The lawn, which my dad had meticulously cared for, was patchy with weeds. It looked tired. I paid the driver, pulled my small suitcase up the cracked concrete path, and used the key that had been on my keychain for 10 years, a key I was sure they'd forgotten I had. It turned with a familiar click. I stepped inside. The house was quiet. The air was thick with the smell of turpentine and burnt toast. In the living room, a half-finished canvas of a distorted-looking cat sat on an easel. Paint tubes and dirty brushes were scattered across the coffee table, right next to a stack of red-stamped envelopes. I walked over and picked up the top one. Final notice, it read in bold letters. Lauren, what on earth are you doing here? I turned. My mother, Barbara, stood in the doorway to the kitchen, clutching her floral robe. Her face was a mixture of shock and annoyance. I could ask you the same thing, I said, holding up the envelope. I thought you were handling this. Her face hardened. We are handling it. It's just a temporary cash flow issue. You don't need to come barging in here at 6 a.m. From behind her, Chloe appeared, yawning dramatically. She was wearing silk pajamas, her blonde hair a messy halo around her head. What's all the yelling about? You're disturbing my creative energy. She saw me and her eyes widened slightly. Oh, it's you. Did you bring us money? I almost laughed. It was so blunt, so perfectly Chloe. No, hello. No, how are you? Just a transaction. In a way, I said calmly. I dropped the foreclosure notice back on the table. I know about the second mortgage, Mom. The color drained from Barbara's face. Chloe just looked confused. The what? The second mortgage, I repeated, my eyes locked on my mother. The one you took out 8 months ago for $25,000. The one you didn't tell me about when you swore up and down that you were on top of the bills I was paying for you," Barbara stammered. It was an investment for Chloe's career. She needed supplies, and there was an opportunity to rent a gallery space for a solo show. It was going to pay for itself. Did it? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Chloe finally seemed to grasp the situation. Her face crumpled. It's not my fault. The gallery owner was a fraud. He took the deposit and disappeared. It's been so traumatic for me. I haven't been able to paint properly for weeks because of the stress. I looked from my sister's theatrical tears to my mother's panicked expression. The same old story. The world revolved around Chloe's feelings, Chloe's art, Chloe's trauma. My father's house, the only thing he'd left us, was just collateral damage in the ongoing production of her life. "So, you lied to me," I said to my mother. "You took the money I sent for the mortgage, used it for whatever you wanted, and then you secretly borrowed against the house to fund another one of Chloe's projects, a project that failed. And now the bank is going to take our home. Is that about right?" My mother flinched. "You make it sound so ugly. We were going to pay it back. We just needed more time." "Time isn't something the bank is interested in," I said. I walked past them into the kitchen. The sink was piled high with dirty dishes. A bottle of expensive French wine, empty, sat on the counter. An investment, she'd called it. "You have 3 weeks until the auction." They followed me, their robes swishing on the linoleum floor. "Well, you're here now," Barbara said, a note of her old entitlement creeping back into her voice. "You're successful. You can fix this. Just pay it off, Lauren. It's the least you can do for your family." I turned around and leaned against the counter. I looked at them, truly looked at them. My mother, whose love had always been conditional and aimed in another direction. My sister, a black hole of need dressed in silk pajamas. They saw me as a wallet, an emergency fund, an invisible force that fixed problems so they could continue their lives uninterrupted. They expected me to write a check, maybe give a small lecture, and then get on a plane and disappear again. But they didn't know the promise I had made to myself years ago, sitting alone in my cap and gown. They didn't know about Mark's advice. They didn't understand that I wasn't there to just patch the hole in the boat. I was there to take the helm. "Oh, I'm going to fix it," I said, my voice as cool and clean as a line of code. "But you're not going to like my terms." Their shock was a thick, unpleasant silence in the kitchen. They stared at me as if I had just started speaking in a foreign language. My mother recovered first, forcing a laugh that sounded like cracking glass. "Don't be so dramatic, Lauren," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Your terms? What is this? A business negotiation? We're family." "Exactly," I replied, my voice even. "And as family, I'm offering you a solution. Just not the one you want." I pushed myself off the counter and walked over to the small, wobbly kitchen table. I pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for them to do the same. They hesitated, then reluctantly sat opposite me, clutching their silk robes like armor. "Here is my offer," I began, placing my hands flat on the table. "I will not give you $25,000 to pay off the second mortgage. That would be like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. You'd just do it again in 6 months for Chloe's next big break." Chloe gasped, offended. "That's not fair. This was a real opportunity." I ignored her. My focus was on Barbara. "Instead, I will contact the bank tomorrow morning. I will buy the debt, and then I will buy this house." Their faces went blank. Buy the house?" my mother whispered. "But it's our house. It's your father's house." "It stopped being his house when you gambled it away," I said, the words sharp. "It will be my house. I will be the sole owner. My name will be on the deed. The house will be safe from any future investments or fraudulent gallery owners." The reality of my words began to sink in. Chloe's face, which had been a mask of tragic artistry, was now twisting with genuine anger. "So you'd kick us out? Your own mother and sister? You'd make us homeless?" "No," I said calmly. "That's the second part of my terms. You can continue to live here." A wave of relief washed over my mother's face. She reached across the table, trying to take my hand. "Oh, Lauren, I knew you wouldn't abandon us." I pulled my hand back. You will live here as my tenants. You will sign a formal lease agreement. And you will pay me rent every month." The relief on her face vanished, replaced by pure, unfiltered rage. "Rent? You want me to pay rent to live in my own home?" "It won't be your home," I corrected her. "It will be my property. And you will pay fair market value. I'll check the local listings, but I imagine it's around $2,000 a month for a house this size." $2,000? Chloe shrieked. "Where are we supposed to get that kind of money? I'm a struggling artist. My work requires my full emotional and mental energy." "Which brings me to my third and final term," I said, turning my gaze to my sister. "You will get a job, Chloe. A real 9-to-5 job with a steady paycheck. It doesn't have to be glamorous. You can be a barista, a receptionist, a retail clerk. I don't care, but the era of mom funding your hobby with my money and this house is over. Your art is now what you do on weekends. Your job is what you'll do to help pay the rent." For a full minute, no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the old refrigerator. My mother looked like I had physically struck her. Chloe was breathing heavily, her chest puffing out, the victim act replaced by the fury of a queen being told to scrub the floors. "You're a monster!" my mother finally choked out, tears welling in her eyes. These ones looked real. "A cold, cruel monster. After everything we did for you." "What did you do for me?" I asked, the question hanging in the air. "What exactly did you ever do for me? You ignored my achievements. You dismissed my career. You missed my graduation. You took the money I sent to keep a roof over your head and lied to me. You see me as a solution, a bank, not a daughter. Well, the bank is setting new terms." I thought of my conversation with my lawyer, Mark, just last week, when I'd first suspected something was wrong. I'd laid out the family dynamics, the endless requests for money for Chloe. Mark had leaned back in his expensive leather chair. "Lauren," he'd said, his voice calm and steady, "my father had a saying. He was a shipping magnate. He always told me, never patch a sinking ship, buy the whole fleet. Don't just solve their problem, take control of the asset. It's the only way you'll ever have peace." I was buying the whole fleet. "I have a contract," I said, reaching into my designer handbag and pulling out a folder. I slid it across the table. "It's a simple rental agreement. I suggest you read it. The bank auction is in 3 weeks. You have until Friday to decide. Either you sign this lease and agree to my terms, or I let the house go to auction and you can figure out where to live on your own. The choice is yours." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "I'm staying at the downtown Marriott. You know how to reach me." I walked out of the house without looking back. The sound of the front door clicking shut behind me felt final, like closing a chapter of a book I never wanted to read again. I got into my rental car, a sleek, anonymous black sedan, and drove away from the tree-lined street I grew up on. I didn't feel triumph or sadness. I felt quiet. The roaring engine of anxiety that had lived in my chest for years was finally silent. I checked into my hotel room at the Marriott. It was on the 15th floor, with a wall of glass overlooking the city lights. It was a world away from the dusty, cluttered house filled with Chloe's half-finished canvases and my mother's suffocating expectations. I ordered room service, a steak, medium rare, with a glass of expensive red wine, and sat by the window. I didn't check my phone. I knew it would be a battlefield of missed calls and desperate, angry texts. For the first time, I was letting them handle their own storm. Back in the house, I could imagine the scene perfectly. The silence I left behind would have exploded into chaos. "She can't do this!" Chloe would be pacing the worn oriental rug, her hands flying around her head. "This is our home! She's stealing our home!" My mother, Barbara, would have sunk into her favorite armchair, the one with the floral pattern faded from years of sunlight. Her face would be a mask of tragedy, but behind her eyes the gears would be turning. She was a survivor. She was always looking for the next angle. "Calm down, Chloe," she'd say, her voice trembling for dramatic effect. "Your sister is just upset. She's been working too hard. She's not thinking clearly." "Not thinking clearly?" Chloe would shriek. "Mom, she wants me to get a job at a coffee shop. Me! Do you know what the steam from an espresso machine would do to my hands? My delicate, artistic hands? I know, darling, I know, my mother would soothe. It's barbaric. But we have to be smart about this. We can't be homeless. That was my mother's primary fear. Not the loss of dignity, not the breakdown of her family, but the loss of her physical comfort. Her home was her kingdom, the stage for her daily dramas. So what do we do? Chloe would whine, collapsing onto the sofa. We can't pay $2,000 a month, and I am not becoming a wage slave. My art will suffer. My soul will wither. We'll sign her ridiculous contract, my mother would say, her voice low and conspiratorial. We'll sign it for now. We'll play her game. Once the house is safe, we can reason with her. She's still my daughter. She has a good heart under all that coldness. I can get through to her. I could almost hear the words. She still believed she held the puppet strings. She didn't understand that I had cut them. I wasn't a puppet anymore. I was the owner of the theater. The next 2 days were silent. Just as I predicted, no calls, no texts. They were stewing in their own toxic brew, trying to formulate a strategy. On the third day, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was a masterpiece of passive aggression. Lauren, honey, it's your mother. I'm just so worried about you. This isn't like you. Please call me. Chloe and I are just heartbroken. We just want our family back. She didn't mention the contract. She didn't mention the rent. She was trying to pull me back into the old emotional quicksand, where my guilt was her weapon. I deleted the message without a second thought. Friday morning, the deadline arrived. I had a light breakfast in the hotel cafe, reading the Wall Street Journal on my tablet. At 10 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The contract is signed. It's on the front porch under the mat. Please call the bank. Barbara? So, they had chosen survival. I felt a flicker of something. Not pity, but a detached sense of confirmation. They had done exactly what I expected. They had taken the only logical path to preserve their comfort, even if it meant bowing to my terms. I called Mark, my lawyer. They signed, I said. I'm heading over to pick it up, and then I'll wire the money to the bank to pay off the mortgage in full. Good. Mark's voice was crisp and professional. Once the title is clear and in your name, you'll be the legal landlord. Remember, Lauren, any deviation from that rental agreement is a breach of contract. No late payments, no excuses. You have to be firm from day one. I will be, I said. I thought again of his father's words. Never patch a sinking ship, buy the whole fleet. I wasn't just patching their debt. I was now in command of their shelter, their stability. The dynamic had been permanently rewritten. The ship, the crew, the entire fleet. It was all mine now. I drove to the house the next day. The Tesla was silent, gliding through the suburban streets I knew so well. It felt like a spaceship landing in a forgotten world. I pulled into the driveway, the exact spot where my father's old sedan used to leak oil. The house looked the same, a little more weathered, perhaps. The paint was peeling slightly near the porch swing. It was an asset now, a line item on my portfolio. It wasn't home. I took a deep breath, grabbed my leather briefcase, and walked to the front door. I didn't use the key Mark had given me. I knocked. A firm, steady rap of my knuckles on the wood. It was the knock of a landlord, not a daughter. My mother, Barbara, opened the door. She was wearing an old floral apron, and for a second, her face lit up with a familiar, hopeful smile. Then she saw my face, my business attire, the briefcase in my hand. The smile faltered and died. Lauren, she said, her voice a little shaky. I didn't know you were coming. I'm here to conduct the initial property inspection, I said, my tone even and cool. As the new owner, it's standard procedure. I stepped past her into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. The air inside was thick with the same old scent of lemon cleaner and something vaguely like disappointment. My eyes scanned the living room. A stack of Chloe's art magazines was fanned out on the coffee table. A half-finished painting of a wilting sunflower stood on an easel in the corner. Inspection? Barbara repeated, closing the door softly. Honey, this is our home. You don't need to. It's my property, I corrected her gently but firmly. And this is the procedure. It's all in the rental agreement you signed. I started in the living room, making a show of looking at the walls, the windows. I ran a hand along the mantelpiece, my fingers coming away with a thin layer of dust. The fireplace will need to be professionally swept and certified before winter. For insurance purposes. Chloe emerged from the hallway, a mug of coffee in her hand. She leaned against the doorframe, her eyes narrowed. Well, well. Look what the cat dragged in. Come to lord it over us, have you? I ignored her and moved toward the kitchen. Chloe, I said, not looking at her. It's good to see you too. In the kitchen, I pointed to the faucet. Is this tap still dripping? I asked my mother. I remember it dripped 10 years ago. Sometimes, Barbara stammered. I'll need to have a plumber look at it. Please make a list of any other maintenance issues. You can email it to me. My email address is in the contract. Lauren, please, my mother's voice cracked. She reached out to touch my arm, but I shifted slightly and her hand fell away. Can't we just sit? Have some coffee? Talk about this like a family? We are not a family discussing a problem, I stated, turning to face her fully. We are a landlord and her tenants discussing the terms of a lease. The time for family talks is over. You made that clear when you didn't show up to my graduation. The words hung in the air, sharp and cold. Barbara flinched as if I'd slapped her. Chloe snorted. Oh, here we go. Still bitter about that? Grow up, Lauren. I did, I said, turning my gaze to her. I grew up and bought your house. Now, let's talk about the rent. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a payment schedule. The first month's rent is due on the 1st of next month, which is in 8 days. Payment can be made via direct bank transfer. The details are all here. I placed the paper on the clean part of the kitchen counter. Chloe laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You can't be serious. You're actually going to make us pay you rent? It's what the contract you signed says, I replied calmly. And what if we don't? She challenged, taking a step forward. What are you going to do, Lauren? Throw your own mother and sister out on the street? You don't have the guts. I looked from her defiant face to my mother's tear-streaked one. The old ache, the childhood yearning for their approval, tried to surface. It was a phantom limb, a pain from a part of me that had been amputated long ago. I looked at Chloe, at her smug certainty that I would fold, that the old family dynamics would win. I gave her a small, tight smile. The contract is a legally binding document, Chloe. An eviction process is straightforward. Don't test me. I closed my briefcase with a decisive snap. My inspection is complete for now. I'll expect your list of maintenance issues by the end of the week, and the rent on the 1st. I walked out of the kitchen, through the foyer, and opened the front door. I didn't look back. As I walked to my car, I could feel their eyes on me through the window. I got into the silent, clean, powerful machine that I had earned and pulled away from the curb. The 1st of the month was coming. It would be the first real test. She thought I didn't have the guts. She had no idea who I had become. The 8 days leading up to the 1st of the month felt like a strange, silent war. I didn't contact them, and for the first 3 days, they didn't contact me. I imagined them in that house, my house, moving through the rooms like ghosts, the air thick with unspoken words and resentment. I focused on my work, coding for 12 hours a day, losing myself in the clean logic of algorithms. It was a world where input had a predictable output, a stark contrast to the chaotic emotional calculus of my family. On the 4th day, the first text arrived. It was from Chloe. A single, blurry photo of a crack in the ceiling of her bedroom. The caption read, "The whole place is falling apart. You expect us to pay for this dump?" I didn't reply. An hour later, another one came, a photo of a faucet dripping. This sound is torture. It's affecting my creative process. I ignored that one too. My silence seemed to infuriate her more than any argument could have. The texts kept coming, a barrage of petty complaints. The floorboards creaked. A window was drafty. The refrigerator made a humming noise. It was a performance of victimhood, and I refused to be the audience. Then my mother started. Her texts were different, laced with a sweet poison I knew all too well. "Lauren, honey, your sister is just emotional. You know how artists are. She doesn't mean it." Followed by, "I was just remembering when you were little. How you and Chloe used to play in the garden. We were so happy then. Don't throw that away. Each message was a carefully crafted guilt trip, designed to pull me back into the old dynamic where her feelings were my responsibility. I replied to only one of her texts, the one that asked, "Can't we just talk about this as a family?" My response was simple and cold. I am available to discuss maintenance issues via email. As for the rent, the terms are on the payment schedule I provided. I felt a pang of something, a ghost of the little girl who just wanted her mom's approval, but I pushed it down. That girl didn't own a tech company. That girl didn't own this house. 2 days before the deadline, an email arrived. The subject line was, "List of required maintenance." It was from Chloe. I opened the attached document. It was 12 pages long, 12 pages of microscopic, exaggerated, and outright fabricated problems. She listed things like, the color of the front door is psychologically oppressive, and the ambient energy in the living room is negative, requires professional spiritual cleansing. She demanded a complete renovation of her art studio, including north-facing skylights for optimal artistic inspiration. She was trying to bury me in absurdity, to make my position as a landlord so ridiculous and difficult that I would just give up. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, a man named Frank, with a single note, "For our records." The morning of the 1st of the month, I woke up at 5:30 a.m., my usual time. I made coffee and sat at my desk, the sky outside my penthouse apartment turning from black to a soft gray. At 9 a.m., I logged into my business bank account. I refreshed the page. Nothing. I refreshed it again at noon. Still nothing. I checked one last time at 5 p.m. The account balance was unchanged. They had called my bluff. Chloe's smug, challenging words echoed in my mind. "What are you going to do, Lauren? Throw your own mother and sister out on the street? You don't have the guts." I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a strange, quiet calm, a sense of inevitability. I picked up my phone and called Frank. "They didn't pay," I said, my voice even. "I assumed they might not," Frank replied. He was a no-nonsense man in his 50s who had helped me with all my property acquisitions. "What are your instructions?" "Begin the formal eviction process. Serve them the notice today." "Understood," he said. There was no judgment in his voice, only professional efficiency. "It will be done." After I hung up, I stared out the window at the sprawling city below. I had built this life, this view, this power, one line of code at a time. My father, a quiet man who was always overshadowed by my mother's drama, had only ever given me one piece of advice, a phrase he repeated on the rare occasions we were alone. I thought of it now as I watched the traffic flow like data streams on a circuit board. My father always told me, "Value is measured by what you build, not by what you're given." Chloe and my mother had been given everything. They had never built a single thing of lasting worth. That evening, I couldn't resist. I drove my Tesla, its electric engine silent, and parked down the street from the house. I saw it immediately. A white official-looking paper taped to the front door, the pay or quit notice. As I watched, the front door flew open. It was Chloe. She stared at the paper for a second, her body rigid with disbelief. Then, with a scream of pure rage that I could almost hear through the thick glass of my car, she ripped the notice off the door, tore it into tiny pieces, and threw them into the air like confetti at a funeral. Her eyes scanned the street, wild and furious, and for a brief moment, they locked with mine. I didn't flinch. I just put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving her standing in the wreckage of her own arrogance. The game had just begun. The legal process was slow, a series of papers and deadlines that they ignored with a baffling sense of immunity. For 3 weeks, it was a war of silence. Frank updated me on each step. The 3-day notice expired, the unlawful detainer was filed, a court date was set. They didn't show up. A default judgment was entered. The final notice, the sheriff's 5-day notice to vacate, was posted. Still nothing. It was like they believed the rules of the world, of cause and effect, simply didn't apply to them. Then, the night before the sheriff was scheduled to arrive, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but a gut feeling told me I should. "What have you done?" Chloe's voice was a low hiss, stripped of all its usual charm. "I've done exactly what I said I would do," I replied, my voice steady. I was sitting in my home office looking at the schematics for a new app on my screen. "They're going to throw us out tomorrow, Lauren. The sheriff. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" "I do," I said calmly. "Humiliation is a powerful motivator. Perhaps you'll be motivated to pay your bills from now on." There was a choked sound on the other end, a mix of a sob and a snarl. "You can't do this. We're family." "You and Mom decided the terms of this family a long time ago," I said. "I was just an expense. Now I'm the one collecting." I heard a scuffle, and then my mother's voice, thick with fake sweetness, came on the line. "Lauren, darling, your sister is just upset. We've been so stressed we just let things slip. We'll pay you, of course. We just need a little more time." "The time for that is over, Barbara," I said, using her first name. It felt like taking off a heavy coat I'd been wearing my whole life. "Don't you talk to me like that," she snapped, the mask slipping. "I am your mother. I raised you." "You raised Chloe," I corrected her gently. "I raised myself, and I did a pretty good job. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run." "You'll regret this," she shrieked. "You'll be all alone." "I've always been alone," I said, and for the first time, the words held no sadness. "The only difference is now I'm at peace with it." I hung up the phone. The next morning, I didn't go to the house. I didn't need to see it. Frank called me around 11 a.m. "It's done," he said. "The sheriff's department oversaw the lockout. Their belongings will be placed in storage for 15 days, as required by law. They can retrieve them after paying the storage fees." "Did they cause any trouble?" I asked. Frank paused. "Your sister made quite a scene. Your mother, however, was quiet. She just stood on the sidewalk and watched. The locks have been changed. The keys are with my office." 2 days later, I went to the house. It was the first time I had set foot in it since I was a teenager. The air was stale, and the rooms felt strangely small. Chloe had left her art studio in a mess. Canvases were slashed, paint was splattered on the walls in angry streaks. It was a tantrum in physical form. The rest of the house was just empty, a hollow space filled with the ghosts of a family I never really had. I walked into what used to be my old bedroom. It was being used for storage, filled with boxes of my mother's old clothes and Chloe's discarded art projects. In the corner, covered in dust, was a small wooden box, my father's. He had passed away just before I left for college. I opened it. Inside were a few old photos, his worn-out watch, and a small leather-bound notebook. I opened it to a random page. It was his handwriting, neat and precise. "A man is not defined by the family he is born into, but by the one he chooses to build." I closed the notebook, a slow smile spreading across my face. My mother was wrong. I wasn't alone. I had a family of my own making. My friends, my business partners, the people who saw me for who I was. I stood in the living room, sunlight streaming through the dusty windows, and I finally understood what my father had tried to teach me all those years ago. He always said, "Value is measured by what you build, not by what you're given." They had been given everything and had built nothing but a life of resentment and dependency. I had been given nothing, and I had built an empire. I took out my phone and called Frank. "I've made a decision about the house," I said. "I want you to sell it." "Of course," he replied. "Any plans for the proceeds?" I looked around the empty room, not with anger or sadness, but with a sense of clarity. "Yes," I said. "I'm starting a foundation, a scholarship fund for underprivileged girls who want to study computer science. I think it's time I made a real investment." Leaving the house for the last time, I didn't look back. I got into my Tesla and drove away, the sun on my face. I didn't know where Chloe and my mother went, and for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't care. Their story was over. Mine was just beginning. From the invisible daughter to a millionaire, I built an empire while they built resentment. I'm starting a foundation for girls in tech. What did you think of my journey from overlooked to undeniable? Subscribe for more stories of triumph.